Okay, yeah, we're live. We're going. Let's talk about music, Chris.
Yeah. So like music.
It's quite a thing, eh?
Yeah, there's a couple notes in there.
There's at least two notes in all of music.
Yeah. Well, only G and D actually.
Those are the only two notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was listening to Velvet Meadow last night.
I saw that. Yeah. I
Yeah.
saw it on the Spotify Friends thing there.
Yeah, I keep on going back to them. It's like, but in a very infrequent way. There's a lot of bands that I find myself just like listening to on a weekly basis. You know, like Spotify calculates by like monthly, but like typically I have like a weekly rotation. That's just like heavy listening, but I don't even typically see Velvet Meadow come up often in my like what Spotify recommends me to listen to today or whatever. But it's like I just remember it and it's like, goddamn, that's some good shit. But they only have like 13,000 or 1,300 monthly listeners.
That's actually crazy. They're so fucking good.
Yeah.
Honestly, this band like I gotta dive into them more.
Same. It's that's the thing. It's like because of the infrequent listening. Like I'm still at that point right now where I'm getting like acquainted with their music and their whole sound. But it's a really good like blend of eras, I guess. Like I find a lot of the synth sounds that they use. Like I don't know what kind of gear they're using, but like it's honestly very like Pink Floyd-esque in the instrumentation and the layering and like the tones, but generally the song structures and the way that they're like that he's just weaving like the composition together is very, very neo-psych. And it's like we were talking about it like a few weeks ago. I remember like the way that neo-psych bands seem to jam, and it's this like meandery kind of thing that is like distinctly different from what one might call noodling, but it's still like it sets this vibe that just you kind of ride on, and it doesn't seem to like I don't know. It's a way of I imagine it's kind of analogous to the concept of looping, except the key difference in a way that in the way that a lot of these neo-psych bands I find will organize their jam sections is that like it's like a loop, but then they have a lot of other things that are in the background that are going that keep it from like even if like the bass and the drums stay the same for like a minute, it doesn't get boring, it doesn't get old, like it keeps fresh because there's like other things going on in the background, and it's like a more freestyle-y kind of guitar that is like somewhere between noodling and soloing. You know, like it just sits in that right spot. And that's why I keep coming back to Velvet Meadow. Even though they're not like currently in my regular listen, I feel like they probably will be. But it just represents a like that kind of key distinction in the way that neo-psych bands jam, because like there's obviously a lot of other ones that do that, but something about this band, this artist just touches on that in a different way. But yeah, I mean, going back, like I feel like how can we trace that, right? Like the evolution of how jams go. You know, like a lot of older era psych bands, like from the seminal kind of like 60s, 70s, I feel like it wasn't dedicated jam sections. They would jam within parts of their songs, and it would there'd be elements within the structure that are a bit more loose, but it was still very structured. Unless we're talking about an actual jam band, right? So I feel like that was the thing, is there's like jam bands, and then there's bands that don't jam like as the prominent aspect of what they are, and that in a lot of neo-psychedelic rock, people have been merging that and found ways to incorporate jamming within a song that still feels like it has structure.
Yeah, and honestly, I think a lot of that, I'd have to imagine just also comes from the influence of Kraut as well, because like I think like something that bands like New and Can, Kraftwerk were doing pretty good is like managing to keep a whole section that didn't really, I guess kind of the core of it didn't really change too much, but like there was a lot of kind of parts that would come in and out, and like, you know, like little synth, little licks and stuff like that, or arps or sounds. And
Dude, that's a really good point, man. I didn't even think about that. Because yeah, that's like, that was a lot of that was going on in the 70s, right? And like
Yeah.
like into the early 80s as well. And like I feel like, obviously I wasn't around at the time, but just looking back from what I can kind of discern, it seems like that was never, like those bands were never like hugely popular.
I don't think so, but I think out of them, New and Can were.
Well, yeah, I mean-
actually, I don't know. I mean, I've heard Kraftwerk's name kind of come around a fair amount, to be honest.
They were definitely known. They were absolutely known. I mean, like, I don't know. I guess, and maybe I'm talking out of my ass here, but I've always gotten the sense that their influence, has been stronger over time than it was when they were active. Is the sense I've gotten, because I typically, like, when I talk to people who are really into that era of music, those bands don't get brought up as often as those bands do get brought up when I'm talking to people who are more entrenched in the neo-psych scene, talking about their influences from that time. You know, I like a lot of bands nowadays that are in this kind of scene will cite bands like New and Can, Kraftwerk as influences,
That's a really good point. Yeah.
right alongside bands like Pink Floyd.
Yeah, I think it's just like kind of that eclectic blend of influences as well. Like, you know, like in terms of like the jam sections too, like Grateful Dead and, you know, bands like Fish and the band, and those jam bands also have a big impact on that as well, because I think they kind of like, in terms of relating it to the live experience at least, I think a lot of more bands are kind of willing to take liberties, we'll say, with extending certain sections and just kind of noodling, but in a more kind of directed, focused kind of way.
Yeah, that's definitely another key point there, is like, I think bands seem to be taking more liberties now and just kind of being a bit more free in like what they're doing, like not being bound to a certain style or a certain genre, whereas like, and maybe people always felt like that, but I guess it looks different in retrospect, because, you know, you look at bands like the band or Fish or Grateful Dead, and it's like, you got to imagine looking back that, like, you know, in that time, it's like they know what they are, they know what they're doing, they know why they want to be doing this, and it's like, this is what we do, like, you know, this is the whole thing. And then I think a lot of that probably has to do with just being established, and then fast forwarding to now, there's a lot of acts that are not super established, because, you know, I think the waters are just muddier. There's a lot more people making music nowadays. There's a lot more of everything. It's just very saturated.
Yeah.
And as a kind of byproduct of that, I think it seems like people just care less about like intentively doing one thing, and they're just kind of just like straying within their style.
Yeah, and I definitely think a lot of that also has to come with the whole just rise of kind of the DIY scene.
Totally.
Not that it's like a whole new revelation. I mean, this has been going on for a while, but, you know, it's kind of boomed in the past, I mean, even more than 10 years, probably like 15, right? Because like, I think bands like Mac DeMarco also made it bands like Mac DeMarco. People like Mac DeMarco who were having a big impact on that quite a while ago, you know?
Yeah. When did he start up again?
Oh,
When was like his first like,
boy,
releases?
that's something I'd have to check on Spotify. I mean, I'll just pull it up, I guess.
Yeah.
It's definitely a while ago.
Like more than 10 years, eh?
I think so, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because I was
Have you listened to, actually, hold on, have you listened to anything of One Wayne G yet?
no, that's his like latest, like his whole hard drive thing, right?
Yeah.
No, I haven't jumped into that.
How do you
That's
feel
like
about that?
that's daunting. I feel a lot of things about it, man. It's like I think it's super cool, for one. Like, probably primarily I think it's cool because especially just for the position he's in. You know, like not everybody can do that and have it come across in the same way. It's only because he's the whole ethos of that guy. You know, he's always been this kind of pioneer of the DIY scene, and yeah, just so his whole background within that, I think, lends to something. I don't know, like it's only a DIY thing. Like, you know, I can't see any other kind of band doing that. Like I can't see anyone on a label.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, a label wouldn't let you. You know,
and that's kind of actually what I was gonna say with the whole like rise of the DIY thing. Is like, I think within that, you know, you don't have as many people being kind of told to do what by record labels, because people are just more willing to go DIY because of the rise of people like Mac DeMarco, and you know the list goes on. Obviously, Tame Impala, Giz, you know, just the list goes on and on and on of DIY artists.
People just doing it on their own.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and so there's just, you know, like, let's look at in the Pines. You know, here's a good example, like how their first record was like this kind of jazzy surf rock type deal, and then, you know, they move into this more blues focused kind of project with Slow Blink, and then they released their folk record with Impossible Days. Like, I think just DIY bands are way more willing to kind of just bend and not really stick to doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because like, yeah, when they put out Slow Blink, it's like I remember hearing Hullabaloo, the first single that came out for that, and like, yeah, I mean, as you know, like I don't often listen to singles when they come out because I'm like reserving it for the whole album experience. But that was at a time where I saw that, and like I was super obsessed with their first album, San Lorenzo.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Crap, it's good. And yeah, just all the blend of like, it's got that like surf rock kind of like subtle jazz influence, but it still has like this also kind of like clouded over influence of prog, where it's like it's subtle, but it still comes through. It's not a prominent, like you wouldn't call it a prog record, but it has aspects of that.
You can totally listen to like progressive bands for sure. I mean, at the very least, Pink Floyd, and like how they're kind of extended structures, I guess, if you will. Like just,
yeah, exactly. And just the liberties that they're taking even within that first record of like non-interlude instrumental tracks. Like think of what is it, Lotus Sofa is the song. That's like song. It's like 2 minutes or 3 minutes long or something like that. But it's like listening to that, it seems like they took the same care into that song as like any other song on the album. You know, it wasn't this just dejected, like we need to fill space to make a vinyl worth of music. You know, it's
absolutely
like
not. Yeah,
absolutely not. It seems still very considered as much as the rest of the album. Anyway, I digress. Their first single from Slow Blink, I remember hearing that and just like, wow, they stepped up production. They stepped up just progressions, compositions, structure. The sheer just instrumentation of it is very, very technical.
Yeah.
It's really, really well done, but like not overly so in a way. And that's again like the subtle prog influence. Like it's got that like technical complexity that is reminiscent of prog without being overbearing. And it doesn't like it. Even that one, I still wouldn't necessarily call it a prog record.
It's definitely leaning more into it.
Definitely more, yeah, but not overly so in a way that would deter people who aren't like super into prog, I think. I want to go back though. Did you see when Mac DeMarco's first release was?
Yeah, it's 2012. I thought it was actually earlier than that for some reason. I have to imagine he started earlier than that. He might have been releasing on some other platform.
Yeah, probably.
Perhaps that was just his first. Like I seem to recall watching a YouTube video about him starting earlier than that, like 2008 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he was around because he's from Edmonton, right?
He's from Ontario, somewhere in Ontario.
Okay. I was reading something that he was like in the Edmonton scene at one point, and it was.
He moved around, maybe.
Yeah, I moved around a lot as far as I can remember. I think it was in that article actually when my brother sent me this like a few pictures of like screen grabs of this newspaper article of when he put out that, what was it called, the hard drive thing?
One Wayne G.
One Wayne G?
Yeah.
Why is it called that?
I don't know.
Okay. Either
199 songs. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's
I opened that and like kind of
nuts.
shit my pants. Like, who does that?
Yeah, it's like you scroll through the track listing, you keep scrolling, like, what the fuck? This is not just an album.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway. Okay, so presumably he was recording music for a while before his first release, or at least releasing stuff before his first Spotify release, like an official kind of thing, right?
Yeah, we should just actually fact check when.
Yeah,
just
check
pull
this
it.
out. Check this out. But yeah, I was reading the article that, or like the newspaper kind of column thing that my brother sent me pictures of. That was like in reference to One Wayne G, and it talked about his kind of background. I wish I could remember more of it right now, but yeah, it talked about like his kind of getting into different music scenes and like his whole DIY approach and like using cheap and just cheap gear and not much of it, you know, kind of just like scraps of whatever you need to get the bare bones recordings of things, just put things together on a multi-track. But anyway, yeah, the just earliness of it, like in that like early 2000s, kind of like coming into the 2010s, like, because that seems to me to be like the real start of the DIY scene.
Well, I do think it was going on before. I mean, it's always been a thing, right? But I think
It's always been a thing.
We were talking a while ago about how the access to recording equipment over the past like decade has drastically increased.
Oh yeah,
it's way easier to record yourself. Like the I don't really know when these first started coming out, but I imagine over the past like 15 or so years. But like cheap interfaces that have one or two inputs.
Yeah.
Like $100 for an interface is pretty crazy.
Yeah, super
to be able
crazy.
to record an instrument at really good quality.
Yeah, rewind 50 years. Like, what do you have to do if you want to make music? You got to do a lot more
exactly,
than, you could work like 3 shifts at any old job and like, you basically can buy an interface with like roughly that.
Yeah.
And
I just want to segue really quick. I did find out all this information. So he was actually born in BC here.
wow, okay, cool.
Yeah. Duncan, British Columbia. I don't actually know where that is, but
Never heard of it.
but his origin is in Edmonton, and
Okay.
he was starting in 2008 doing music. He did a self-produced album with a project called Mako Videotape.
Oh
in
yeah,
2009. And then he moved in 2011 to Montreal. Okay, so like 2008 he kind of started, but there you go, like
Okay,
self-produced. So he was probably recording with like multi-track recorders back then.
Yeah.
In 2008.
Yeah. Okay. So,
well, that's insane. So, but bands like that really like kind of just paved the way.
yeah.
For everyone to take a lot of liberties, and that's kind of like, I guess we're getting back on track to being able to switch your style at ease, just doing whatever you want type of deal, just with a lack of label oversight and kind of telling you what to do.
Yeah, because it's just easy to go without a label, and it's kind of like, it's like the poles were shifting, and like slowly to the point where it's like people were like getting kind of more and more weary of labels, and then at one point it just hit this tipping point where people became like so vehemently against labels because of a lot of reasons. People have always not liked labels.
Yeah.
I mean, like, go back to fucking Taxman, right? That's it's like it's always been a thing, but I think there was a tipping point that occurred around the time of things like cheap small interfaces becoming accessible and just more gear being on the market, more like cheap guitars, more cheap drum sets, more just like even like drum pads, like things that make it really easy. You could make a whole, like, any schmuck can buy an interface, and they probably already have a laptop, and then they can download for free VST instruments and make an entire album.
Yeah.
Anyone can do that. It's insane.
I did just think of something as well, though. Like, even with all this equipment, I do think there's something to owe to the idea of streaming services here, because...
Well, I'm glad we're getting into this.
Yeah, I mean... You know, like, which path of this conversation do you want to take, right? Because, like, there would be no place for everybody to upload their music to if we didn't have streaming services at the end of the day. I mean, like, you could, I guess, pander your album on the internet and get people to buy it on iTunes, but let's be real, people aren't willing to spend money on things that they don't already know they like. Hence, listening to the radio and be like, I like this song, let's buy it.
Yeah.
But so the rise of streaming platforms gave way to services like DistroKid or TuneCore, CD Baby, like all these other kind of distro services, and that it goes hand in hand with the whole DIY kind of approach to things. Without all that, there is none of that.
Yeah, and that's why I was asking when Active Marker's first release was, because I was under the assumption that it was earlier. But regardless, that whole like early 2000s era, you know, think of things like LimeWire.
Yeah. Like
that was absolutely seminal. That really paved the way for streaming services, because that was, like, as far as I know, before a lot of paid for streaming services that could act as like just a hub for all music to be uploaded to.
Yeah.
Things like Apple Music or Spotify. You know, it's like
shit gets lost in there, right? Like, and this goes to what I was saying. Like, unless you're already on the radio, like, you're not going to get much downloads on LimeWire because people aren't going to know about you.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, like, as much as I don't want to get too into this, but, like, you know, as much as people complain about it, like, more people can do art now at the end of the day and share it with people than before.
And there's also something to be said about the whole exposure thing of, because, you know, like, before streaming services, you know, paid for or illegally downloaded, either one, before any of that, there's like 3 ways to find out about music, basically. Maybe 4. We'll say going to a concert, you know, it's someone you know, but then you see an opener, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. I know about this band now. That's number 1. Number 2 is just word of mouth. You know, your friend tells you about it, your family member tells you about it. Number 3 would be hearing it on the radio. And then number 4 would be taking a chance at a record store. You know, you see a cool album cover, you'd never heard it before, never heard of it. Who is this band? Gonna try it out. Spend $20, $30, whatever it is, buy a record. And that's, you know, it's a big chance. A lot of people don't want to take that, especially nowadays as streaming is more and more accessible. And you just don't have to take that chance.
I think the other reality is, you know, I think something people often forget as well is that most people just don't want to pay a lot for art. And, you know, that is kind of a shitty thing, unfortunately, that we have to wrestle with as artists, any kind of artist, really, you know, whether it be visual, music, whether it be, you know, like sculptures or really anything, any kind of art. You know, let's take movies, for example. And this can be applied similarity to streaming services. I mean, it can kind of be bundled together here, but like people complain when you get like a slight rise in cost in streaming services like Netflix. Like,
yeah.
And I understand that typically it comes with, you know, like as of recently, I know Netflix upped their cost, and I think you can't stream in multiple locations. So they're definitely, I see why people are combative against it, but at the end of the day, like having access to that many TV shows and movies for like the price it is actually fucking crazy.
Oh, it's super crazy. I mean,
and you gotta, like, I don't know. I get the whole, like, those kind of things are pricey, but you can't have your cake and eat it too here. And, like, you know, like, something, how can I word this properly? I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, people will, it's art, it's still art, and just like complaining over this like kind of like slight increase of fees, like I just think the exact same thing would happen with Spotify, where like if everyone's like, well, it's insane that the streams are only like 0.001 of a cent. okay, so if Spotify were to raise their monthly fee to $50, you're telling me not everyone would be up in arms? People would be pissed.
Yeah.
People would be very pissed.
A lot of people would stop using it.
Dude, I bet you a lot of artists would stop using it even.
Oh yeah.
Because
oh, yeah.
who's going to pay $50 a month?
That's a lot of money.
It
That's
is.
a lot
It
of
is
money.
at the end of the day, and that's why. I don't know, like, as many arguments as there are, and you know, I get it, like, record labels and all, and companies are taking a huge portion of the streaming fees, the streaming revenue. That sucks. That's garbage. That is absolute garbage, but I just don't really see a resolution to that within streaming services, and that's why I just think you probably got to explore other avenues to make money within music other than just streaming services.
Yeah, because, like, realistically, streaming services came in and offered, in a certain way, an alternative to record labels, as we've been discussing in regards to the DIY scene. Because a lot of the DIY scene, like, obviously, like you said, there's always been a DIY scene, but it's become a lot more prominent since like the 2000s. I mean, the entire genre of indie, you know. That's the entirety of that. And that's a lot of people that inhabit that space right now. Oh geez, I just forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, streaming services, in a sense, came in and gave an alternative. They didn't replace record labels, but they gave people another place to go. And I think the problem is that people expected it to be a lot better. Granted, like, I'm not saying it shouldn't have been. It is. I think it is better in a lot of ways, but I think we all wanted more out of it. But when there is no resolution, we have to instead seek reconciliation and understand that, like, this is just what it is. It sucks, you know? Like, there's no excuse for things to stay the same way just because that's how they've been. But unfortunately, this is just the music industry at large, like, through every era, you know? Whether you're with a record label or just posting your music on streaming platforms and all that, it's, hey, welcome home. Yeah, that's toasty. Yeah, whether you're posting or whether you're uploading it through a record label or through just your own kind of DIY onto a streaming services, it's never been profitable. The way to make money as a musician, as an artist, has always been playing shows, touring, selling merch. You know, it's like, it's even with record labels, it's always been the DIY side of record labels. Like, what else can I do on the side?
I guess so, but, like, I think it's important to recognize too that for most, like, bands who get signed to record labels mostly handle all that. Like, you do give them ideas for stuff like that, but you have so many people that you're corresponding with. I think more than anything, the point to highlight is not that, like, not solely about the whole making money thing, only with shirts and playing shows. Like, that is a big part of it, but I don't know, I think something people fail to recognize as well, like, is in a world that was dominated by illegal downloading services for music, it's kind of impressive that the service that is a paid service actually ended up being the dominant model.
Yeah, that is.
And I don't know, I think something to also remember within that is, because of the paid model, crazy algorithms exist that give exposure to artists that otherwise would not have exposure. Yeah. And that's something that isn't really possible without the whole, and yeah, there's the whole argument that it's still shitty, and it is. It's always going to be shitty. That's kind of the whole gimmick of living. Yeah. But I don't know, I think people are just too quick to shit on it, and also don't typically offer any kind of working alternative to the model.
Yeah.
I would love to see a service where I know people have, I don't know, like, I've seen a couple suggestions where people will suggest, like, you pick a couple artists that, like, portions of your, like, subscription fee go to, but even within that, that's not fair to other bands that you listen to. Like, you know.
I mean, I think it's a good direction, you know. See, I forgot about that, but I feel like I've heard about that as well. But yeah, that's a good, like, if you just take each individual Spotify profile of like everybody that has a Spotify account and uses it, and it's of all the, what is it, like $14.99 or something like that per month, and you just take that and you kind of take a pie chart of like what their monthly listens have been and send the money that way, you know, because like right now it's just a generalized thing. It's like all the money from these subscriptions go to the Spotify, and then they kind of disseminate that based on how many streams are, how many bands are getting how many streams. But I think if we kind of have it divided in a way that's like, I'm not listening to all the bands on Spotify, so the money that I pay for my Spotify subscription I think it would be nice if it went just to the bands that I listen to, and then obviously a portion to Spotify as well for hosting the platform, because like that's just the way it is. And same thing, going back to like Netflix as well. Like nobody's watching everything on Netflix.
There's thousands of things on there, but the point still resides that like any little increase of cost to an incredible convenience is like, I get the frustration with it in a world where things are getting more expensive, but I don't know, I feel like this is one of those things that's kind of a very nitpicky thing to be kind of complaining about a cost increase. I think the rising cost of groceries should be more of a complaint thing than the price of art.
Yeah.
Art is, you're paying for someone's time, whether people realize that or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's and again, this is kind of counterintuitive to the whole thing of not getting paid from Spotify. But again, how many bands do so many people know about that go to see shows or order something from the band online that you never would have known about had it not been for some algorithm from Spotify?
Exactly, and I think that's like the biggest point to me within this whole discussion is just that, because like even just among like you and I and like a handful of friends, like the amount of bands that like I don't think any of us would have ever found out about a lot of bands that we listen to regularly if it weren't for Spotify. Like think of the Dead Pirates, like you're gonna see that in a record store here? I don't think so. But you found it through an algorithm on Spotify that just, it got put in front of you and you're like, hey, I'll check this out. And even then, what's the monthly listeners? It's a pretty small band, but they're making insanely good music. They're putting a lot of time and care and probably their own money into it to record all that. And, you find out about that. You listen to them on Spotify, you tell all your friends about them on Spotify. Through that word of mouth, maybe let's highball it, say like a few thousand listens on their Spotify from like everyone that you've told and your own listens, just of streams. That's still not much money, but you bought the record. So that's direct money to that band that would never have gotten to them otherwise, like if they weren't on streaming services.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bands like that.
Oh, so Karen, like how many monthly listeners do they have?
Oh yeah, like a few hundred, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not much. Maybe they've gone up. I don't remember. I
don't
haven't
think
checked
so.
in a while, but I hope they've gone up.
I
But
don't,
yeah.
I don't think they have. Last time I checked, I think they were still at like 300 or so. But the point still resides that like, yeah, it just opens the door for routes of revenue, I guess, that weren't otherwise possible. And going back to the whole, can't have your cake and eat it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a tough industry. It's always been a tough industry, and again, like it's not to say that it's not to give an excuse for things to stay that way, but like people gotta.
Yeah, it should change.
It should change, and we're definitely on that path for change. There's a lot more uproar, I think.
In certain aspects, yes. I don't know. Like it's certainly, there's certain things that are changing, but I also think that there's always just gonna be the battle against record labels, just because they hold so much power over the industry. And I just think that the way forward for most musicians is probably the DIY route, unless you can swing some type of crazy like 360 deal with a record label.
But again, like, people are wary of these deals. Like, people have heard a lot of bad stories from like the 60s, 70s, 80s of record deals, kind of.
Well, that's good though too. Like, I think being wary of these things, like, if a label's kind of coming after you to sign you, then knowing avenues to kind of bargain over different types of deals, because at the end of the day, they are trying to sign you, like.
Yeah. I mean, it's a similar thing as like any job interview. You know, like, as much as a person wants a job so that they can get paid,
the person across from you is also looking for someone to fill a position.
Exactly.
So they're also in a certain kind of bind.
Yeah, it's the same principle that carries across to music, or like anything really.
Yeah. And you can always hold the fact that you can go DIY over record labels, and I think that is a good avenue.
Yeah. That's the most important, one of the most important kind of things that have come about in the past like 20 years from this, is like the accessibility of DIY. Because, you know, like, I got to imagine Mac DeMarco has likely been approached by record labels.
Oh, definitely. I think he signed. I think he has his own. That's what's up there. But regardless, I do think it also, though, I think within this as well, I think the other reason that people get a little bit frustrated is because I think it takes a certain kind of person to also do the whole DIY thing. It's a stressful kind of venture to take on.
Yeah,
there's a lot. I mean, you have, there's so much that goes into. I mean, just take our own experience of recording even one album. I mean, you're doing two, but there's so many things to think of, even just with recording one thing.
Yeah, and that's the appeal of record labels, I think, is like, it's just like, you kind of just like, out of my hands, all I have to do is write music.
You just focus on the art.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about the art of, like, managing a band too. Like.
Oh yeah.
Go back to more recent examples again, like bands that do everything themselves, you know.
Yeah, and there's a huge appeal to that, you know, and like people eat that up, you know, like, honestly, we talk about Giz, right? Like, you know, people eat that up. People love seeing the videos they post on their YouTube of, like, this is how and why we're doing everything ourselves. And it's freaking cool.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, they could get approached by any number of record labels, and they'd still be like...
I'm sure they have.
They probably have, and they're like, nah, like, we're good.
Well, then you can also swing shit, too, because you're speaking of the relationship with, like, ATO Records here in the States, where it's like, all they do is handle the U.S. pressing.
Yeah.
I think that deal's still active. I think they do all the Gizverse USA stuff, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Well, either way, even if that relationship doesn't exist anymore, like, they kind of hold that.
Yeah.
Because, again, ATO was probably, like, we'll do it for you.
Yeah.
I imagine that was a type of relationship that was reached out from ATO. Or maybe Giz reached out, but either way, you know, like, you kind of hold a lot of cards in that point.
Yeah.
Because you can still do it yourself. It's definitely harder, but... Yeah.
Yeah, and again, just all those, like, the videos they post about that and, like, kind of talk about that, and just even in, like, interviews, it's like it shows other people that are kind of getting into this scene. It's like, oh, I can do everything myself. It's like further reinforces that notion. It's like, you know, I bought my first interface in 2019, like a few years ago. But, you know, I didn't realize, like, immediately right then, it's like, I could do everything myself. It's like, no, that takes a while to kind of coalesce and to understand, like, all the different things that go into making an album and just recording and getting everything together. You know, it's because there's so many different avenues. You know, you got to get your interface, you got to learn how to record, gain staging, mixing, mastering.
Yeah, recording is its whole own venture.
It's a whole adventure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, playing instruments aside, like.
So it's tough, you know, like, you gotta, you know, you wanna make an album, you know, you learn an instrument. That's like a multi-year venture. Learn 4 instruments. Jesus Christ. Learn to record. learn
Well, I
to
mean,
mix. You know, like
I
there's
think a
so
lot of
much
people
that
just
goes
do it
into
with
it.
like MIDI though, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the kind of approach a lot of people take, and it's only one instrument, I guess. And also like the rise of, I keep on saying that exact statement, the rise of, but with programs that allow you to kind of like, I don't want to say easily, but for lack thereof a better term, easily program in drum beats and things like that. It kind of makes that whole process like condensed. You don't have to wait like.
It's easier than learning drums.
Oh, for sure. But you can kind of wing it in a way too, which is kind of cool. Because like, I think of like the days when you and I were messing around on like FL Studio.
Yeah.
Like a long time ago now, like
Yeah.
8-9 years ago at this point.
So why?
And like how
Goddamn.
I didn't really know anything about piano or anything about that.
Same.
Anything about music theory. And it's just like draw in notes. It's like, oh, these 3 notes sound good together.
Yeah.
And you kind of like work visually. So that's I guess the kind of shortcut around all that.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, it still takes a shit ton of time to make something sound. It's a whole venture. It's definitely a whole venture.
It's a whole venture, and again, it goes right back into the saturation that we were talking about, like at the start of this, right, where it's like just the sheer amount of people making music of all different kinds from like 60 years ago and now.
Like, how many songs are there? What a question to ask.
How many songs are there?
How many songs are there? Do you think Google can answer that?
Dude,
I don't
think so. How many songs are released every day?
How
You
many
know?
songs are there?
Like I would like to
This is quite
see
believable.
I would like to see a comparison, like a side by side of like people born every day, like the growth rate of the human population. Put that beside the growth rate of songs that are released every day.
Oh wow! Check this out. I actually found this is probably a very trustworthy site, musicianwave.com. According to this website, so we should probably take this with a grain of salt, it is estimated there are roughly between 97 to 230 million songs. Spotify has 100 million and adds 60,000 new songs every day.
60,000 every day. How many people are born every day in the world? Is it 60,000?
Can you imagine?
Dude,
No, there has to be.
there's like 1-to-1 songs and people. 60,000 new songs uploaded to Spotify every day.
400,000-ish people are born a day. That's actually crazy.
That's a lot of people.
Imagine putting, like, try to visualize that. 400,000 new ones. That's insane. That's a city of...
that is, yeah. Oh my god. That's a small city born every single day.
Holy shit. That's crazy.
Oh my god.
I thought it was way less than that. I thought it was like maybe 100,000 each day.
Yeah, that's
400,000.
wild.
500,000 people each day.
That's wild. Okay, but back to the songs though. It said on the high end. The high end of that estimate was 97 to 230 million songs on Spotify.
Yeah, it said it was kind of hard to know.
Exist.
Yeah,
And then on
exist.
Spotify was like
100 million,
Yeah,
and they
okay.
add 60 each
Yeah,
day.
okay. Yeah, okay. So like, say highball, like roughly 200 million songs exist.
Yeah.
That's like,
That's quite a few.
that's right now. You know, like, I don't think we should spend the time searching for this right now, but it would be interesting to know how many songs existed in 1980.
You could definitely find the data on
Like, there'd be a
songs probably uploaded per year, or like, you
Yeah,
know.
it would take some digging to find that out, but like regardless, the point is just that like it's exponential.
Yeah.
It's exponential the amount of songs that get released per year because it's always growing. There's always more people making music because music is becoming more and more accessible. Like when I bought my first interface a few years ago, that same box is cheaper now than it was then.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. It's only like $100 and something, $10 or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I think I spent like 220 on it.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like it's crazy.
That goes to show. That's actually crazy that certain aspects of music here are coming down.
Yeah.
Accessibility of recording, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. DIY scene, man.
Yeah, seriously.
Honestly, even that term, the DIY scene, what the hell does that even mean? Like DIY, like everything.
Do it yourself scene.
No, I know, but God damn it. I mean, like, I feel like I hear that used. Maybe this is just my own mind, and I'm kind of using it this way. But it seems to me to be a kind of colloquial thing that it's like it's its own genre, like its own branch of the genre tree of music. But like realistically,
I just think it applies broadly to like a set collective of bands in like any given city or extended region of cities that do things like host their own venues or put together shows in their own like promoted type of deal. Bands that will go to their way and get their own lighting and, you know, visual artists and things like that. Like really take the whole thing.
Yeah.
By the horns, I guess.
But it spreads across many genres. Like it's not
any specific genre. No.
It's not cornered anywhere.
No, at all. No. I think it defines bands those bands I talked about who do have the kind of drive to actually do all this stuff themselves.
Yeah.
I definitely do think a lot of bands eventually cave as well. I gotta imagine that happens. I mean, the whole thing would be very stressful.
Yeah, I mean, not many people can do that. Like even even a band like Giz, like the classic archetypal example of a DIY band in the neo-psych scene, is like, what's their crew right now? Like how many people tour with them?
Oh, a lot.
A lot.
Now,
like it's grown. It's grown, and you rewind to like 2015, and
it was just them.
Yeah, like it's like that's another thing. It's exponential. So it's like, and it's like, you can phrase it in a number of different ways. Like, is it caving? Is it just a different method of expansion? Like, because it's really like they're building up their whole kind of empire.
Well, they're still managing all themselves, right? I think the difference is when you start kind of offloading tasks to things like production companies and things like that. I think it's one thing to hire your own crew of people that assist you in like setting up your stage or like your stage plotting, things like that. But I think that's definitely different than outsourcing that. Like if Giz had a production company that helped them with stage setups and like transporting equipment around, but I think they probably still logistically handle all that themselves. There's a very good chance, at least. Versus someone like Kevin, who now has, I imagine, companies assisting him. I don't think I have a hard time believing that he's still orchestrating all of that.
Is he not doing like mixing and mastering? I mean,
that's different. I mean, in terms of like the live shows.
Yeah. I mean, fuck. We saw Desert Days. Like we saw like on the Thursday, Friday, like the load, like all the trucks, and we don't know who that was for, but presumably a lot of the big trucks were for headliners.
Yeah.
And it's like, and especially
I know Giz has their own semi too.
Okay.
Well, I mean, look at their whole stage setup now. They have like a whole bunch of risers. They have one for Cook and one for Ambrose, and then Michael's got his own throne set up in the back there.
Yeah. But yeah, like bands of that kind of caliber typically will bring their own whole thing, like a whole unique kind of stage setup. And I was going to reference the Flaming Lips set in 2019 at Desert Days, but like I actually don't know how much of that was the band bringing things in and how much was actually just the festival.
The whole background, like, screen type thing, that's just Desert Days. That's just the mood stage.
Yeah. But they had those like streamer kind of multicolored thing.
I'm pretty sure that was Desert Days.
Okay.
Because those were definitely there the rest of the weekend too.
Yeah. Regardless, though, I don't know, like I've seen a lot of live videos of like Tame Impala, and he's got that like whole ring set up. He doesn't bring that everywhere, but he does bring that a lot of places. And that's just like, that's the first example that comes to mind right now, but I know a lot of bands do a thing like that where they have a unique aspect that lends a kind of grandeur to their stage setup. When they can, with like a certain caliber of artist or band, it takes to be able to do that and to pull that off, and then it's bringing that around to every show on a tour. That's no easy task, and that's the kind of thing that takes employing a larger crew. That's the kind of thing you can't just you and a few buddies that play music. That it's not just the band. It's far more than just the band at that point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it'd be interesting to talk to like some bands about logistics, and it'd be interesting to talk to someone like Stu about the logistics of touring at that kind of level, I guess. Like how was the whole in their most recent residency tour? Like, how did they get things to places?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
were they flying with all their gear, or did they have a truck that was driving across the country and they hired people to do that? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, because I guess those residencies were like,
Kind of far apart.
yeah, they're not close to each
Well,
other.
like they had time between them for sure, but like going from Tennessee to Chicago to Colorado. Actually, no. I guess it kind of makes sense. You start in like kind of the lower southeast quadrant, make your way up to Chicago, which is in the middle of I think Chicago. No, I think it was Red Rock second. Actually, that's what it was. But either way, there's definitely some distance between the cities, so it'd be interesting to talk to them about how they just move stuff around for that whole tour.
Yeah, and like, what does the average sound check look like? What's the load in? You know, how like, if your set starts at 8 p.m., what time do you get there and start setting up? How many days in advance are things being prepared at that venue?
Yeah, and how involved are they now?
Yeah.
Are they like real? Are they super involved with the whole stage plotting, or at this point do they have their hired crew that just does everything and they come in and do the sound check and then?
Yeah, like who knows? Like that'd be a really
pretty big
interesting
venues. Like you gotta imagine they definitely have a. I can't imagine they're doing all that stuff themselves.
Yeah, I doubt it at this point. Like that would. Goddamn.
I'd be very impressed if they were.
Yeah, I'd be very impressed.
I can't. That'd be such a cool point to be at. Just having, like, you just roll up to a venue and you just go do your sound check, and you go back to a, I guess they call it a green room. Chill until you actually have to play.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about any like the load in or anything like that. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously.
But also, I guess, costly. But again, it would just be cool. We should.
Yeah, I imagine a sort of bell curve going on where, like, a band that is, like, if all you're doing is bringing yourself and a bit of your gear to play a show, you know, it's like, that's like at that kind of early point, that starter kind of thing. And then it's a more quick thing, you know, you get in, you load in, do sound check, and then you just wait to play. But then there's, like, the bell curve rises as a band gets bigger and they have a more elaborate stage setup. They have more gear to bring in. The load in takes longer. There's more logistics to undertake in that. But then the bell curve drops off, and it's like you just have things set up for you in a certain sense, or like certain things are set up for you, and it's back to just like a bit more free time of you get there, you do your sound check, you load in a few things, and like that's it. It's interesting how that goes. Yeah, man.
Oh, did you see that I know yesterday I mentioned it, but the Mother Tongues, I thought they released an EP, but it's actually a whole album.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Take a look at it here. What's it called here? It is called Love in a Vicious Way. It's a 10-songer, 32 minutes.
Wow, okay.
I'd really like if these guys released something longer.
Yeah.
But I still think it's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, because their first EP, Everything You Wanted, that's what, like 20-some minutes? It's not super long, but god damn, it's good. Holy crap, it's good. There's not much that I regularly listen to that's like less than 30 minutes long, but like that's one of them.
Isn't Postponement only like 30 minutes long?
Yeah, that's one of them as well.
It's only 6 songs, I guess.
Postponement?
Yeah. Oh no, it's more than that. It's
No,
like
it's
9.
definitely more than 6. Yeah.
Right. That's a good band. Goddamn.
I think that's still my number one on Spotify, like most played album, which
It's
is like
very high up there for me too.
is crazy to me. Like I would not expect that because they're not like in my on the Spotify stats thing. It's not in my top 10 top artists because like it's basically that I've listened to by then.
And it's only 30 minutes long, so it's not going to be one of your most played artists. That does make sense, though.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, we've probably known about that album for quite a while at this point. Probably a handful of years.
Yeah, 3 years.
At least. Yeah. That's a good artist. Talk about Floral, if nobody has heard of them.
Floral, yeah, like Flaural.
Yeah.
Like, not like flowers. It's a nice play on words.
It is, yeah.
I like that a lot. It's actually really good.
It's a very good name.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you listen to Rahan yet?
No, I haven't. I still haven't done that. God damn. Yeah, I don't know. I've been listening. I've had their other albums in my downloads. I just honestly forgot that came out. Their most recent album there. Yeah, I gotta get more into Night Beats. They're really cool.
Yeah, it makes them cool, kind of.
Yeah, it's got like. It takes like what I love about that like neo desert rock. That to me is like largely defined by bands like Mystic Braves and Alalas, Rosa Maria, but like, yeah, the way that Night Beats does that, it's like, it takes that, but it also puts it in this like, just reverb drenched, groovy psychedelia that is like, kind of removed from that like high visceral energy. That
Nice.
I didn't mean to word that like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
What band you're thinking about?
Yeah, it's kind of removed from that like higher energy, and it's not as. I don't know what other adjectives to use there.
No. I mean, it is a good adjective to describe the kind of split there. Yeah, like it definitely carries its own type of energy, but it's far more in the groovy vein of.
Yeah, and I
things.
really, really like that because I don't often hear that mixed with that like surfy, deserty kind of vibe. It's a really cool blend that they got going.
Yeah, no, it's definitely unique. I can't think of a lot of bands, honestly, that remind me of them too much, or remind me of what Danny does there. Did you listen to that episode of that podcast with him by chance?
I listened to one. Was it on Roadcase or
No, I
what
think it was
on?
might have been Overcast.
I don't recall where it was, but I did listen to a podcast or interview or whatever you call it with
Danny
Danny
Lee Blackwell.
Blackwell.
Yeah, I think that's his name.
Night Beats.
That's yeah.
It's just one guy.
It's just one guy.
Wow. Yeah, really good. It's
There's so many things coming out all the time. It's honestly even hard to keep up with just the bands that I follow that are releasing things.
yeah, even in this like pocket of neo psych, like
And then also
there's
discovering new things.
still so
and
much.
There's
Yeah.
just so much to intake.
Yeah.
So much good music. I guess we'll be getting psychedelic porn carpets new records soon too.
High Visceral 3.
Oh.
Yeah, I wish, dude. Nah, either way, that's one of those bands that like fucking do anything. It's gonna be good.
Yeah. I'm very excited for it. Night Gnomes was fantastic.
How's that sitting in your current like ranking, your
It's up
personal
there for
ranking of
sure.
their albums?
It's top 3. I think I still like both High Viscerals more, but I think I like it more than both Whatchamacallit and Shaga.
Mm.
I think because it has elements of High Visceral, kind of in the song structures in a way.
Yeah, it's got that. I mean, like we were talking about in the Pines, it's like I wouldn't classify a lot of PPC, like the High Visceral stuff or Night Gnomes either. I wouldn't classify that as prog albums, but they have a bit of that. You know, it's kind of tinged with that. in some ways.
I would definitely say the first High Visceral. Honestly, no, definitely the High Visceral series has a lot of prog influence on it. I mean, Jack even has kind of gone on record and talked about that, right? Because he was saying how Mars Volta very much inspired the birth of the band. Yeah, I don't know. It's. I think that style of influence from prog, I think, is my most favorite. It's not overt to where it kind of gets. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not too proggy. Like it has that kind of way that it'll meander through structures and return to certain points, but it's not it's not Gentle Giant or like ELP to where it's almost like kind of off-putting in a certain manner.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of overbearing in a sense. Like it feels like a lot of that stuff, like a lot of that earlier prog from the early 70s and late 60s is like I don't pick out as many as large of a blend of genres. It's like only prog, it feels like, or like predominantly prog. But then like a lot of stuff that's coming out now, like stuff PPC is putting out, stuff that In the Pines is putting out, it's prog, but it's not only prog.
Well, and this just goes hand in hand with what we were talking about earlier too, about the ensemble of genres that I think people who at least try to push boundaries are willing to put together, because things like Crowd, things like prog, listening to and have like someone like King Crimson, and wow, okay, I could put aspects of the way they kind of think about music together with aspects of someone like Bob Dylan, if I wanted to, right? And you can create this whole kind of new.
Yeah, it's a bigger blend, and then also with kind of going on that same thing. The more time goes on, the more gap between a now and then kind of thing. You can, like, yeah, a lot of bands nowadays are influenced just as much by their contemporaries as they are by their predecessors.
Yeah.
And so like
I think that's always been true though.
I guess that's always been true.
The Beach Boys,
but
right?
I think
like they endlessly talked about how the Beatles were a massive influence on them just for wanting to experiment and kind of push their own boundaries as musicians.
Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think the effect of that like time stretched blend of influences, I think the effect of that becomes more pronounced just with more time.
Yeah, for sure. And that's probably also just because there's more to draw from as well. I gotta imagine that's also just a huge part of it. Yeah. I guess I don't really have anything else to say about that. Kind of worded that as if they had more to go on there, but
I mean, yeah, it's I think that's like a strong enough sentiment on its own. It's like there's a lot to unpack within that. It's just like we were talking about, the saturation of just the ever increasing amount of music that gets released. But yeah, I don't want to just reiterate stuff here.
Yeah, exactly.
What time are we at here? About an hour and 3 minutes.
Seems like a good enough point to kind of
Yeah.
wrap it up.
Well, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah.